Doncic wins the game at the buzzer.
The More Better Podcast.
What up, everyone? Welcome to the Board Better Show. Another one on deck as we work our way through the season. Flying solo today for this episode, but it should be a fun one. We've got plenty to get through. We have our usual homework review where I'm going to tackle the Chicago Bulls specifically. Having some fun with our scouting report today. Going to dive into the NBA superstars. Who is a superstar? Who isn't a superstar? And how many are there? And then obviously I'll go through best bets. We'll go through our squad ride section. And then we'll finish things off with a fun little Q&A section. So some people have already sent some questions through. If you guys in the live chat today have any other ones, just drop them in the chat. Producer Chris will jump to them, pull them up on the screen, and we can talk through those as well. Have a little bit of fun with it. But there's already plenty of good ones lined up as well. So I definitely look forward to getting to that section today. But let's kick things straight off. Let's get into our homework review. Let's take a look at, like I said, the Chicago Bulls, because I think they're an interesting team right now in the betting markets where their offense is being pretty heavily overvalued. I think there's really good opportunity here on their totals. And I think anyone that follows, my plays, be it on BetStamp or in the Discord, knows that we've made a pretty tidy profit betting unders on the Chicago Bulls over the last sort of week and a little bit now. And I think that could continue as well in the near future. Obviously, their offense is kind of what they hang their hats on in years gone by, where their defense has been what's let them down. But things have certainly flipped this season. Now, it's not necessarily because I think their defense has figured things out or is significantly better in any way, shape, or form. I think it's a little bit of Billy Donovan finally getting guys to just show a little bit more effort there, but also having Alex Caruso available and healthy after missing large parts of last season plays such a huge role for them there. And someone that can just stop the point of attack, which has always been the problem for them, especially when, they had to play guys like Kobe White for very significant minutes at the guard position and paired alongside Zach LaVine. Neither of those guys are going to stop the point of attack, and teams are basically just going to be able to penetrate at will. So having someone like that obviously makes a pretty big difference, and it alleviates a lot of the stress for guys like Vucevic, for guys even like DeRozan as well. Patrick Williams helps them sort of fit into their roles as help defenders a little bit more. So unsurprising, I don't think, to see that uptick defensively from them. But offensively, things just really sort of coming to a bit of a halt. I mean, if you look at their style of play, everything at the moment running through Vucevic, which is fantastic from an efficiency standpoint, but really slows down this offense pretty drastically. We're talking about almost 4 to 5 seconds longer per possession offensively. Now, that's a really, really big margin for any team in the NBA, particularly for a team like the Bulls, who, like I said, they're also such a heavily flawed team in terms of the lack of spacing that they have out there. So they don't have a lot of three-point shooting on the floor. They are the highest mid-range frequency team in the NBA, which obviously isn't surprising when you have someone like DeMar DeRozan, who is such a high usage guy, Vucevic as well, who loves operating as sort of a mid-range scorer himself. I think off the top of my head, just having to double look now, LaVine, the only guy who is sort of a higher frequency three-point shooter versus mid-range shooter comparative to the rest of that roster. So, it's not surprising, obviously. Three's worth more than two. And if you aren't shooting a lot of threes, you're kind of capped as to what you're going to score when you already have less possessions than what I think the market is taking into account right now as well. So that opportunity for me is probably going to exist up until the trade deadline and up until the Bulls finally pull the pin and try and blow this thing up. The opportunity to bet, especially on inflated totals. Yesterday, we got it under 230, which closed at 226. If we still keep getting numbers sort of in the very high 228, 229 range or above, this is going to be a dead nut unders team. And I think it's going to be a really good opportunity as well to keep taking advantage of the market, who doesn't seemingly have a proper rating, I don't think, for how this Chicago Bulls offense is operating at the moment. And like I said, it's a slower paced one. It's high volume twos. It's a defense that's also a little bit higher rated than what the marketplace currently has them at. When you just combine all of those things, they're not necessarily huge edges and margins individually, but collectively it gives us a pretty good opportunity to stay ahead of the marketplace there. So yeah, the Chicago Bulls unders. It's not something I thought I would be saying at this point of the season, especially at the start of the year. But that's, I think, the direction that we're going to be rolling in going forward. Taking a look at team total unders, taking a look at full game unders. That is the best way, I think, to attack them. And that'll be our homework review for today. So homework review has been pretty profitable for us as well. So far, since we started running the show, we've gotten ahead of the marketplace with the Washington Wizards. We've gotten ahead of the marketplace with the Memphis Grizzlies unders with Steven Adams out of the lineup. We cashed another one with the Charlotte Hornets yesterday as well and their team total. We hopefully will keep ahead of the market as well with the Boston Celtics. Was another homework review that we did with Marcus Smart out of the lineup. We took an unders there. We'll talk about the game that they are playing later today as well, because that is one of our best bets. So hopefully, like I said, the homework review continues to be a profitable little target for us, and we can stay ahead of a lot of these marketplaces here. And yeah, once again, it will be on the Chicago Bulls. It will be on looking at their full game and team total unders for this next sort of week and a half or two, where I think there's potential to still make money on them just before they go ahead and blow things up. But let's get into our next segment here, because this is one that I think is just going to be a little bit more fun. Our scouting report for today. We've deep dived into a lot of teams individually, especially when we've had guests that can provide it. But for today's scouting report, I have an interesting topic, and it came up in a conversation I had with a friend. I've tweeted it out since then. How many NBA superstars are there in the league right now? I think that in itself is an interesting question to be posed, and one that everyone's going to have separate answers for. I counted them out, and I landed at 15 after trimming a couple out. I think I landed on 17 initially and trimmed them out just because 15 is a nicer number. So apologies to those players. But 15 NBA superstars for me. I'll read out who is on my list if you guys are in the comments. In the live chat, feel free to drop in anyone you think that I've missed. Happy to discuss those, of course. If you're watching this back, definitely comment on the posts, and we can see if we can finalize what is considered the wider scope of superstars in the league. So for me, and this is in no particular order, except for number 15, who is placed accurately and is right on the cusp. But obviously we've got Jokic, we've got Giannis, we've got KD, we've got Kyrie I put in there, Tatum, Embiid, Luka Doncic, Ja Morant, Kawhi Leonard, Steph Curry, Devin Booker. I got Zion in there. I got LeBron and AD in there. And at number 15, rounding it out, I've got Dame in there. So Damian Lillard for me, just making the cutoff. I know I've left off people that are probably going to garner attention, such as Jimmy Butler, who I don't have in that category of superstar. I think there's probably a few more that have a fair case. There's a lot that are on the cusp. One I personally have on the cusp that I really wanted to put on there, but obviously I think doesn't quite fit with the rest of that tier, is Anthony Edwards. He's right there. It's frustrating to have seen him start the season the way that he did, and I don't know how much of it was him not buying into his new role and the system around him, or if it was just him genuinely taking time to become accustomed to having to play with two bigs, which obviously takes away a lot of his game, given the rim pressure he can provide for his team and his ability to get to the basket. So for me, Anthony Edwards, one of those players who's like right there on the cusp that I didn't put in there. No, that one wasn't in order. SGA is another one that's on the cusp. I think my list isn't just this season. It's kind of like a little bit of, I don't want to say a legacy, but over maybe the last couple of seasons are obviously in play. The fact that Kawhi is there means it a little bit more than that. But it is sort of still heavily influenced by what players are doing this season as well. So SGA not being on that list, I think, can be considered a little bit harsh. He's right there as well. Him and Anthony Edwards, like, that sort of next generation superstar, they're undoubtedly going to get there, I don't think. But they're not quite there yet. So those guys just on the outside. Donovan Mitchell, another one just on the outside for me. Obviously an elite scorer, taking his game to like the next level in Cleveland so far this season. I mean, if he sustains the level of play he's had to start the year, for not just the duration, but then for the playoffs for them, it's kind of undeniable as well that he would be a top 15. He's easily a top 20 player Like he would be in the next 5 for sure for me. Um, Tyrese Halliburton, that's another good one. Another one who's like an undoubted superstar of the future. Probably not there yet, um, just because of the youth more so than anything else. His game is still developing. I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet. I think when he reaches his ceiling, he's going to be an absolute superstar. And the Pacers apparently getting him back this week, which is going to obviously completely change the landscape of their short-term future, given how badly they stumbled. Paul George is another one, right on the cusp for me. I think he still gets a lot of unfair criticism. He's an elite two-way player, fantastic defender, fantastic offensive scorer, can score at all 3 levels, spaces the floor, can get to the rim, can operate in the mid-range, literally does everything you want. So another player who probably should be there and would be there if I had this as a top 20. Like I said, Jimmy Butler not there. Is Jimmy Butler in the top 20? I don't know. Playoff Jimmy Butler is. It's just hard. He's one of those guys who's in the regular season only shows up every now and then when necessary. But when he does, it's kind of, I think, undeniable. But yeah, Paul George, and like Mitch just said in the chat, I mean, he was in the MVP conversation a few years ago. In OKC, he was very much there or thereabouts. So I'm a big Paul George fan. I just don't understand the criticism he gets from a lot of fans. Yeah, and that's the thing with Jimmy Butler, right? Like, it's just in certain situations, it's undeniable that he's as good as anyone in the league. He just chooses not to do it on a nightly basis. And I guess with an injury history like his, he kind of has to prioritize health more so than anything else. So it's a little bit frustrating in that regard. Just having a look at other guys. James Harden is another one that's kind of just outside for me right now. And I think that's more because of his role at the moment. And credit to him for buying into that role, because it's clearly made Philadelphia a much better team and much more consistent team. But it's hard to have him in there as a superstar right now. Obviously, what he was doing in Houston was as good as anything we've seen in recent history in the NBA. I think it was kind of the Luka before Luka. Let's not get into where I rank Russell Westbrook in the NBA right now. But yeah, Harden, another one that's kind of just on the outside for me. Looking at other guys I had on the cusp as well. De'Aaron Fox is a really fascinating one. I think he's another player who's just super undervalued by the wider public. It seems like he's so good, and I think people just slandered him so much because of the fact that he was chosen, if you want to call it that, in place of Tyrese Halliburton as part of the trade that landed them Sabonis. Ultimately, that was a win-win trade for both teams. It's very rare that you get an undeniable win-win trade, but that's exactly what it was. Both teams benefited immensely short-term and I think long-term as well. But I'm a big De'Aaron Fox believer, and I think he is one of those guys who is extremely undervalued in the NBA, and one of those guys who still hasn't probably reached their ceiling either. I think the whole playoff experience he'll get this season will just elevate his game a little bit more, and he'll start sort of really knocking on the door of sort of that top 20, 25 player in the league going forward. He's still got age certainly on his side. But I think that's basically it. Looking at some of the other teams that aren't featured there, the Raptors, I don't have anyone from Toronto kind of near it. Siakam, I think, is their best player. He's not someone who, if he's your best player, you're not going very far, unfortunately, certainly not in contention. So I'd struggle to put him in the top 30, maybe around 30, if I were to put out a whole list. For Washington, Bradley Beal, I don't have anywhere near there. Porzingis, much the same as well. Orlando has an absolute superstar in the making in Banchero, and another really good player in Franz Wagner as well. But both those guys, I think, obviously a few years away still from necessarily being there. Chris Middleton is another one who's kind of always considered underrated. I think he's always been fairly treated, to be perfectly honest. He's not someone who, again, if you take away Giannis and Chris Middleton's your best player, you're not going anywhere. So for me, he's not even close to being a superstar or anything in that conversation whatsoever. Ranking, if I were to rank those 15, that'd be a fun task. Maybe I'll get to doing that this afternoon. I think I'll rank the I think I'm going to go and try and rank these 15 players, and I'll put them up on Twitter, and you guys can sort of pick them apart as you will. That'll be a fun little task for this afternoon, and I don't know how long it'll take me, and I don't know how many attempts it's going to take me. Clay's another one where I just don't think he's even close to being a superstar. If he had his own team, that team would probably barely make the playoffs, to be honest. He's a stud, and he's a star. Like David said, like it's very okay to be a star and not a superstar. Like to be a superstar is just so hard. These to even be in the league, like there's 450 of these guys in the world. It's just ridiculous. Like these bench guys are just elite athletes in their own right. They can score the basket like buckets for days without any issue whatsoever. Like the differences between a superstar and a star are just so minimal, but those 1% things add up drastically, I guess, when you get to that point and trying to differentiate players. And Clay's one of those guys. He's a star. He's as good as anyone in his role. He's in the perfect system, but he's just not a superstar, and he never will be, and he never was, and that's completely fine. That's no dirt on his name whatsoever. But yeah, I think another perfect example of someone who you would never have in the top 20 players in the league, but is absolutely deserving of all the praise that he gets for what he does on a near nightly basis. But yeah, ranking these guys out should be a lot of fun. It also comes down as well to like how much do you weight both ends of the floor to players who, like Giannis, who are just elite defensive players as well as offensive players. I think they should be rated higher personally. But obviously, not a lot of people see defense as the value that it once was, so you don't get that level of recognition anymore. But that's my scouting report for today, having some fun with just putting together my superstar list. Like I said, I come up with 15 superstars. Those are the names of those players that I read out before. I can certainly understand people that want to say there's less and maybe just 10 superstars. I think that's very fair. And maybe if you want to say 20, I wouldn't push back too hard either. Yeah, James, I have Devin Booker in my 15. I'm pretty sure I read him out. I hope I read him out. Hey, he's a superstar for me. Devin Booker is absolutely a superstar. If you have any doubts about that whatsoever, just look at that Phoenix team in the first 2 months of the season versus the last month and a half of the season. And that is kind of all the proof you need. The drop off, I know they had other injuries as well, but the drop off is just absolutely significant when he's off the floor. He's become an elite playmaker as well, which is credit to Chris Paul and what he does in nurturing guys like that. But as a scorer, he's as good as anyone in the game right now. He performs on a nightly basis. He's fantastic in the clutch. He's reliable as anyone. So for me, he's everything you want in a superstar. And he's another guy I think that just doesn't really get the recognition he deserves either. So yeah, like I said, that's my 15. I think there's 15. I'm very keen to hear everyone else's opinions as well. So definitely drop them in the comments, be it on YouTube or on Twitter as well. So we'll, I think, revisit this topic next episode for sure, not just to see what you guys had to say, but when our next guest comes on, I'd be keen to throw it to them and see how many they have and exactly who makes their list and who doesn't make their list. But let's jump into our next section. Let's get to today's best bets. If anyone's in the Discord, give Juki a nudge and let him know that this is the only part he needs to tune in for. So 3 plays for today. I locked in the under in Brooklyn, Boston a little bit early. So 227.5. That looks like it's 224 now, which is pretty much where I make it. I have it at 223.5 is sort of fair price. Like I said earlier, the Celtics are one of those teams we've already spoken about in homework review, where this offense without Marcus Smart is pretty drastically different to what the market seems to rate them at. Now, they're a lot less efficient. They're a lot slower. There's a lot less possessions. The quality of shot drops off. All of those things in a game against a Brooklyn team who is going to be missing a lot of offensive pieces today as well. TJ Warren being out is pretty big for them, given the scoring he gives them, especially off the bench. No Ben Simmons as a creator as well, I think, puts a lot more impetus on Kyrie Irving to not just be a shot maker, but a shot creator. And having to do all of those things against a Boston defense, I think, is going to leave this team a little bit one dimensional in this matchup in particular. So I wouldn't be surprised to see both these teams sort of struggle in the way that they did last time they played, where it was almost like first to 100 wins. Maybe, a few more points here and there either side, but ultimately I think that's kind of the style of game we get. A lot of half-court basketball, Boston really slowing things down, playing half-court sets, knowing full well that their defense is capable of stopping Brooklyn and trying to run in transition. The Nets going to make an impetus to really get back in transition and not allow those easy opportunities, knowing that Boston's offense can get a little bit stagnant in those half-court sets. So everything for me sets up really nicely. Like I said, I had a pretty decent market edge. We got ahead of the market there. I like the matchup perspective, and I like the projection in terms of pace, which is a big one for me when it comes to playing on totals. So hopefully this isn't another one that just goes in the CLV trophy case and doesn't actually deliver for us. I'd like to think we'll be catching that ticket. Like I said, we got in 227.5, 226.5 for a lot of guys as well, which is fine. The market currently 224. Wouldn't be surprised to see it drop just that half point more and close at where I have it, which, like I said, is 223.5 in between those two numbers. Running it back on the Orlando Philadelphia unders as well. Grabbed in under 231, a little bit of value there. Now 230.5, completely fine playing the unders there. I make it exactly what I made it last time, which is closer to sort of 224. I still think that both these teams have defenses that can bother the opposing offenses enough and slow them down enough. We saw Orlando manage to do that in a really good way. Their physicality sort of really made Philadelphia uncomfortable. And if you just listen back to Doc Rivers' post-game press conference as well, he spoke about exactly that, saying that Philly was simply out-muscled for the most part. The Magic were more physical, and that's ultimately what dictated the game. He challenged his team to basically match that physicality this game. And he also said that the second chance opportunities and points off turnovers are what killed them, and they need to clean that up, which I completely agree with. If they do clean that up, then the Magic will go back to what we saw in that first quarter of the game a couple of days ago, where Orlando just couldn't generate anything in half-court sets, really struggled against Philadelphia's zone defense as well. I think that's going to be the case again. That zone, especially when they have Matisse Thybulle on the floor, being able to sort of really harry on the perimeter and then having Joel Embiid just operate as a free roamer around the basket makes them very hard to break down in those situations. So I can see Orlando's offense really sort of struggling today and coming undone, especially if Philly does clean up, like I said, those second chance opportunities and those points off turnovers. Then, this could be a game where the scoreline is very much flipped and it's the Magic who struggle to crack 110 in this one, which I think will put us in a pretty good position for this full game total. So again, a little bit of market value there, not too much. I think there's still plenty of market value available at 230.5. I make this one, like I said, sort of around that 224 mark, and I think that there's good reason to believe it stays under there as well. The last one that I've added for this morning didn't have a number on this last night. And the market steamed in the opposite direction. So it's given us more value here, which is fantastic. Portland at Memphis under 239. Another one where we tackled in the homework review, and Memphis's offensive struggles without Steven Adams. They've also been without Desmond Bane, which obviously just really highlights how limited they can be on offense there. He's questionable tonight. Obviously, if he's out, that's a pretty big boost for us. But even if he's in, the same problems exist for Memphis for me in the half court. And as bad as Portland's defense has been, their defense travels better for whatever reason on the road. And I think if you look at all of their games on the road, especially against West Coast teams, they really make a point of slowing the game down. Their number of possessions per game on the road, drastically lower than what it is at home this season. Their pace of play lower than what it is at home this season. And I think that's exactly going to be the point of emphasis from Chauncey Billups again tonight, is just don't let Memphis run. A lot of teams obviously trying to make point of that. Trying to stop that is another thing in its entirety. But if they can, limit the opportunities that Memphis has to run in transition, to run off of turnovers as well in particular, and live ball rebounds, then we are going to get into a situation where this number is going to be super inflated and we get a really good look. So even if both teams shoot efficiently, we should be good here. I come out at 229, so way below this number here. I know for the only reason I haven't made this a bigger play is I know I might still be overcompensating for the whole Adams situation. Especially if Desmond Bain does come back, then that number obviously jumps up a little bit too, and the edge isn't quite so pronounced. But at the same time, it's still pretty notable versus what it's currently sitting at. So under 239 for me in Portland, Memphis, the other bet. Let's try sweep this board, go 3-0 on these totals, and the unders certainly have been hitting this last week and a little bit now. As these totals in the marketplace have seemingly ballooned, and the general pace of play has also seemingly dropped off around the league as we sort of edge closer to that all-star break, which isn't surprising either. That's sort of a common theme we've seen in years gone by. So that's the bets we've made for today. Let's queue up everyone's favorite segment, though. Let's jump into Squad Ride for today.
You're very confident, I'll say that. But you shouldn't be.
All right, guys, I'm just pulling up all of the official Squad Ride bets for today that you guys have put forth in the Discord. If you haven't already joined the Discord chat, definitely click on the link below in the video and come join the conversations there. We are sitting at 3-2 for the Squad Ride on the Board Bettor show after taking a loss last episode on the Minnesota Timberwolves money line, which was selected by our guest Noops and put forward by our good friend and my co-moderator in the Discord, Zachariah. So let's try and get back on track today. I'll read out what we've got here and then we'll try and tackle these out. So Thunder first quarter against the Houston Rockets makes a lot of sense, of course. Malik Beasley over 2.5 3-pointers made. That's a really good look. Klay Thompson over 22.5 points. That's also a really good look. Memphis minus 5.5 today at home to Portland. It's hard to argue with how Portland are playing at the moment. Lauri Markkanen over 26.5 points. Another one kind of hard to argue. So some pretty good ones there. And the Thunder trifecta, so Thunder first quarter, Thunder first half, Thunder full game. Yeah, that's a hard one to argue as well. My only hesitation with the Thunder is, especially full game. Okay, we're laying 5.5, asking them to win by 2 possessions on the road. I know it's Houston, but it's still a new role for a very young team in the NBA. And one I probably wouldn't want to be doing. I think there's plenty of really good opportunities still to bet on the Thunder this season. We've seen Houston at home be really feisty early as well, first quarter, first half. So I'm going to steer away from the Thunder as the official Squad Ride. Memphis minus 5.5. My only question there again is, can this offense do enough? And my fair price on the game is 5, so I can't steer you guys to 5.5 as the Squad Ride. So I'm going to go into those player props instead for today. Klay Thompson over 22.5 points, the first one. I think that's a game where potentially the overs is certainly going to be in play, despite Minnesota being a very half-court based team and having a really good half-court defense. I think just having guys that can stretch the floor really puts pressure on, obviously, how they line up with Rudy Gobert there in particular. They're going to basically just run Rudy through every single pick and roll action that they can, I think. And then having guys like Klay and pull space of floors for catch and shoot opportunities. That's a really good look for me. The 2 in Utah as well. Malik Beasley's 3-pointers made and Lauri Markkanen's points. Very similar as well, where I think that obviously, especially at home, Utah space the floor. They just hurl away from deep. And I think that, Toronto's Achilles heel has always been trying to limit 3-point scoring, especially with the way they pack the paint and harass on the inside. So I'm going to lean towards those 2. I think I'm going to go with Malik Beasley's 3-pointers made here. Couple of reasons. One, I have a market edge on it as well, so I like it immediately off the bat. But 2, like I said, it's just the Achilles heel for Toronto. They give up a ton of corner threes in particular, so I think that the opportunity is going to be there for him. A lot of catch and shoot situations. I think he's the guy who's going to get the volume of them. if he makes enough, is going to be the only question mark, and he will certainly have the opportunity to do so without a lot of pressure, I don't think, just given that Toronto's perimeter defense is still something that, for whatever reason, Nick Nurse hasn't quite addressed from a schematic point of view, not necessarily from a personnel point of view, but so I'm going to go Malik Beasley over 2.5 3-pointers made. That's the official squad ride for today. I will probably be jumping on that one as well as a player prop for myself. Like I said, I already have a little bit of an edge there. And now coupled with the fact that I do like the way that those two teams match up from an offense versus defense standpoint. Let's get back on track with the squad rides. Let's try and move to 4 and 2 this season on those. Let's dive into the final, what it will be the final segment for today. Like I said, a little bit extra, just given that we've got the opportunity and time now rolling solo for some Q&A. And we had a few questions sent in already. If there's any other ones in the chat as well, we'll bring those up. But let's dive into some of the ones that were already sent in previously. So first one up, what are some of the advanced metrics you use the most? Are there deeper than offensive defensive ratings that are more representative of how well a team is performing? So for that one, I do, especially for totals. So for totals, I'm not going to necessarily give away everything I use, but some of the ones I put a lot more emphasis on: effective field goal percentage. So something that I think, coupled with as well, I use shot quality average, which kind of just gives us a little bit more of a representation of when teams might be overperforming or underperforming their offensive expectations, which is really important in the marketplace. I think the problem with a lot of people who build models to start with, they do a really good job of telling us what has happened. Using the data from games to highlight how a team has performed, where as bettors and investors in general, whether it's stock markets or sports betting or anything else, your job is to kind of get ahead of the marketplace and try and project where it is a team is going to go versus what they've already done. So a couple of things, like I said, for totals, effective field goal percentage, shot quality average, those things kind of give us a bit more of an idea of how a team might be performing versus their actual output, and gives you a pretty good opportunity to potentially get ahead of the marketplace there. As well as that, for totals, I think the big one as well is pace, number of possessions per game. If you can properly start projecting that, and then coupling it in with whatever it is that you're running to try and project the numbers, then again, you'll at least get a better idea of how a market total might have landed where it is versus what you're projecting it to be. That's a really, really important one, because if you can't get a grasp of pace and projected possession, then you're kind of blindly guessing as to how a team's efficiency is going to end up over the course of a 48-minute game versus, a team who might be playing at a far faster pace than what the teams that they've already played have been. And that's not necessarily coming up in your numbers. So really important things, I think, to keep an eye on: pace of play / number of possessions, whatever it is you want to call it. And for totals, for me, like I said, try and keep an eye on things like effective field goal percentage, of shot quality, just to try and, I think, put greater emphasis and weight on what will happen versus what has happened. You don't want to get in the habit of what has happened, because then you're not playing to the market and you're essentially always playing catch up. So that's a good question, and hopefully one that helps a little bit. Maybe that's a topic we can dive into deeper as well with some other guests when we bring them back, who also operate with models, and we can share a little bit more insight into some of the things that we both run respectively. Again, without just giving you the entirety of it, because I do also want you guys learning at the same time, and I'm not willing to necessarily give away however many years of work just for the sake of it either. But let's jump into our next question. Is Rui Hashimura a great fit with the Lakers, or was last night more of an outlier? A bit of both. He's a good fit. He's what they need in a couple of areas, but that was also an outlier. I don't think he's someone who, especially let's say they make playoffs, he's not someone who in the playoffs is going to be a massive difference maker. I think he's someone who can help them immensely in the regular season. But come playoff time, this roster as it's currently built is still going to be flawed in the ways that I think we all already know it's flawed. So he will help them short term. I think he will be a nice piece for them long term as well going forward. but not anything that is necessarily going to drastically change their timeline, either short or long term. A nice piece to have, certainly not a top 3 player on a roster that wants to be competing for championships, is sort of the long and short of it there for Hachimura, I think, and the Lakers. Let's dive in. Next one up. Who are your buy and or sell teams the rest of the regular season? That's a really good one. I think there's going to be a lot more buyers than sellers this season, even though I think for a large part of the season, most people thought it would be the other way around, with everyone kind of wanting to just empty the tank a little bit and really try and get as high lottery odds as possible in what is a very good draft class. But just looking at the few teams that I think will sell initially, I think Chicago is going to sell. They're going to blow that thing up. Toronto, the same. It's inevitable. You know, we're already getting all the rumors of what the value is for all of their players in the starting lineup outside of Scotty Barnes. So I think that they're ultimately going to be a seller. Utah will definitely be a seller. I think we already got reports, Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley, of what their price tags will be. They're two guys who can be extremely valuable to a contending team immediately. So they're a selling team. I ultimately think Charlotte will become a seller. The hard thing for them is I don't know who wants to buy what it is they have on offer. Plumlee's not really someone that I don't think provides the value of what they want in return. Guys like Rozier and Hayward, who they want to get off that contract, which I completely agree. They should get off that contract, but it's just not easy to find someone to go and take that on board. So I think ultimately, yeah, they are still classified as a seller, but they're not necessarily probably going to do too much, just because I don't think there's going to be a lot of activity around teams wanting to take on board what it is they offer. The buy teams, I think that list is just huge. And it just comes down to as well, like, who do we think can actually buy big? Like, you know, if Chicago and Toronto are blowing it up, who can feasibly offer something to take on those contracts and still give up something in return that's of value to those guys that are looking to go into potentially a rebuild or just to retool immediately? You know, some of the Eastern Conference fringe teams, the Knicks, the Hawks, the Heat, the Pacers, even the Magic, I think they'll be a buy team as well. Those guys are all going to be looking to buy in some way, shape, or form to retool what they already have. The Knicks and Hawks, I think, are the perfect example. They just need more depth, more pieces around their sort of bigger named players. The Hawks might finally part ways with John Collins, which has kind of just been teased for the last 2 years, and I think might just be in the best interest of both parties. I think maybe Collins does need a fresh start elsewhere where he can garner a little bit more responsibility on the team's offense in particular, because I don't think he's being properly utilized right now in Atlanta. And they might be able to get something decent in return there. So they'll be looking to shop around for sure. The Knicks, another one. I think they need to try and shop around, add to what they already have in terms of their core and fill things out a little bit, just from a fringe perspective. Indiana has stated they want to buy. They're not a selling team. So I've kind of put them in there just because that's what they say. I don't know what it is that they're going to try and buy, but maybe they do. I think Orlando, I saw rumors that they're trying for Fred VanVleet. That'd be super interesting. I don't know if he necessarily fits their timeline, but that style of player just seems to make sense for them. You know, a guard who can space the floor, who I think can provide them the experience and veteran leadership on the court and off the court that a young team can do, and who's also sort of a little bit more willing to understand their roles, where, you know, Banchero and Wagner are sort of the primary guys. He can get them to their spots. He can set them up accordingly, but he can also sort of take a back seat and just be that scorer as well when those guys are running, you know, DHOs or pick and rolls between them. So I think that for me, those are the buyers in the East. The buyers in the West, the obvious ones, Dallas, Memphis, both those guys, I think especially Dallas obviously want to try and do what they can right now, but it's probably less straightforward for them. They just don't have as much to offer. I think Memphis can get creative what they can offer and bring back. They're an exciting one. Minnesota's a buy team, most definitely. They're going to do everything they can to move off of D'Angelo Russell right now and buy, obviously to replace him. But I think if another opportunity as well comes up to buy someone that can help space the floor a little bit more for them, they do that in a heartbeat. Same with Phoenix. Same with Portland. I don't think that they're going to blow it up. There's no way they went and did what they did in the offseason just to blow it up a few months later. If they can make their team better, they're going to try and do that, I think, before going down that route. And the Lakers are a buy team. We saw it with Hachimura. They're not done yet. They're going to try and do what they can to buy and make that roster better than what it currently is. So, those are the buy teams for me and the sell teams for me. I think that there's a lot still that's going to happen between now and deadline day. So, looking forward to that ramping up. Do we think there's still time for Anthony Edwards to have a shot at most improved? Oh, man, like I said earlier, that one really frustrates me because he's playing fantastic basketball right now. With no cat, with one big, we're seeing him, I think, excel at the level that a lot of people anticipated on the back of what he did in the playoffs last season. He was fantastic in the playoffs last year. He's been fantastic these last couple of weeks. Jason Tatum retweeting him for All-Star helps our case immensely. I think at 100 to 1, sure, maybe just put a few dollars on it. It can't hurt. If you can get whatever it is that you can get down on that price, it's not the worst shot in the world. If he somehow was to eke away into the All-Star team, then immediately that's one sort of, checkbox ticked off. And then if he can continue in the way that he has been down the stretch and, maybe a couple of those other guys like Shea and Markkanen just fall off immensely, there's a path for him to at least be in the conversation. And like I said, at 100 to 1, which is what you can probably get in most places at the moment, it might be worth a flyer, but it's not something I would be highly recommending by any stretch of the imagination, just because he's got too much ground to make up, which is a real shame because I'm highly enjoying watching him play at the moment. I really think today's game with Golden State will be a ton of fun from a neutral perspective. And I do hope that he continues in the same manner that he has been lately, even when Cat does come back into the rotation. That'll be the big one for them and how they figure things out. Next question up. I think we've still got a couple more. Are there any moves you want to see at the trade deadline as a fan, Bettor, or both? OG Anunoby, I want him out of Toronto. I apologize to my Canadian friends, but I would love to see him on Phoenix. I would love to see him on Memphis as well. Just both those teams, he could make an immediate impact there for what they're trying to do this season. Him and Mikal Bridges, that tandem in Phoenix defensively as your two wing would just be hell for offenses to try and deal with those two guys. Being able to shut down your primary scorers, you'd be able to basically switch a lot as well. You'd probably try and switch 1 through 4 where possible. Obviously, you have to try and hide Chris Paul as best you can, but you can just do so much with that lineup when you have those two guys on the floor together. And I think he's just the perfect complement as well to Booker and Chris Paul offensively, and even DeAndre Ayton offensively. I think I would also love to see Fred VanVleet at the Clippers. As a fan and as a bettor, I would love that. Again, that just seems the perfect fit. He seems like he would fit into that style really, really well. He also, I think, is deserving of going to another team that's still genuinely looking at a championship at this point in his career. As fun as he would be somewhere like Orlando, it's just that would essentially be the end of the road, I think, for him in terms of title windows. So that would be one I'd really like. I'd love to see Mike Conley in Minnesota. Obviously, like I said, they're trying to shop D'Lo. They need to get rid of him. I would love to see someone of that veteran presence on and off the court on that team. Again, a point guard who knows his role to a T, who can set up, score, has that sort of relationship, albeit part-time, with Rudy Gobert, can also, I think, help Ant develop that little bit more as well and really encourage him to be the main scorer, the main guy on that team. So Conley to Minnesota would be one I would love to see. I don't know how they make that happen. It would probably be a 3-team trade because I don't know if Utah would just take on D'Angelo Russell's contract, although they might. I don't think it'd be the wildest thing in the world. It's an expiring contract anyway if they attach something to it. But at the same time, I don't think Minnesota and Utah are going to be doing deals anytime soon after Danny Ainge kind of fleeced the shit out of them for Rudy Gobert. So as much as I'd love to see that one, I don't think that's high on the list whatsoever. Final questions. What team is in the market for Bones Highland, and what is his value on the trade market? I love Bones. I think there is a market for him. I think a team like Toronto would love to take a chance on Bones Highland, to be honest. If they do end up moving Van Fleet in this window and Gary Trent potentially, both of them in this window, I think they'd be super open to trying to get him, whether it's directly off of Denver or, like I said, in a 3-team situation involving one of their guards going elsewhere, because obviously Denver can't absorb that cap hit right now. Him in Toronto would be great. I think it'd be giving him the chance to flourish in a way that he hasn't and won't be able to in Denver right now. It's kind of like that Bol situation, right? Like he's flourishing right now in Orlando and was just rotting away on the bench in Denver just because he didn't get the opportunities. And it's hard for those young guys. Like so much of it is with these young players, it's, where do you land and is the opportunity there for you to grow and reach your potential? And in a team like Denver, the answer is no, unfortunately. They're a team that's genuinely competing, that doesn't have the flexibility to give these guys the minutes that they probably need to get to the level of play that they need to in order to then, further progress in this league. So I think Toronto is the perfect landing spot. I don't think he's necessarily going to drive a hard bargain either. You could probably get him with an expiring contract and some second-round picks, to be honest. He's not going to garner too much more. I think from what I've heard as well, it's the asking price is quite low, and Denver fans are probably going to be irritated at what they get in return for him. So one of those guys who I think a lot of teams should take a chance on. High upside guy, and it seems a low-risk move for what the asking price is right now, which is not very much. But yeah, I hope he does land somewhere like Toronto where he can. One more question left, I think, or is that the last one? Oh, Jesus. Okay. Last question. What is my biggest pet peeve on gambling Twitter? Jesus. As of today, it's these conspiracy theories. The whole idea that Vegas influences games based on player props might be the fucking stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, player props account for maybe 2%, 3% of like a big book's hold on a day. Do you think they give the slightest shit as to whether they have to pay out a few $1,000s, which, like I said, is probably 2 or 3% of their hold for the day, versus, an actual big limit line or total bet on a marquee event? The answer to that is no. They fucking don't. They will happily pay out whatever stupid amount you are playing in this ridiculous rollover challenge that is just so beyond dumb and comprehension right now. I'm all for you guys having fun. Or anyone having fun with it and, enjoying those challenges. But if you genuinely believe that sports books are influencing these players in any way, shape, or form because of liability, then you are probably beyond help and don't even need to watch this segment whatsoever, because whatever it is you believe, you've got to believe, and I'm not going to be able to change that. And I'm not even going to waste my time trying to either. The second part is for those people as well who like to say, well, ex-mafia members from fucking 1980 said that they used to do it. That was 1980 when guys made like a few $100 a game sometimes. These guys are on multi-million-dollar contracts. You think that they're really going to risk their multi-million-dollar careers to make a few $100 to not score over a certain number because their player prop says so? I just can't fathom the level of dumb that exists right now in this space. I think that legalized gambling in the US has just brought out the worst of humanity in this particular area. Anyway, I clearly gave way too much credit for the average IQ of someone who is in this industry, because the voices are just getting louder and the beliefs are becoming very apparent that people think this is a thing. It is not a thing. I can't make that any clearer. Vegas doesn't give a shit about your challenges. The players don't give a shit about your extra few $100s when they're on multi-million-dollar contracts. No one is throwing games because of player props. I promise you that. Promise you that. Anyway, the other thing that triggers me, that's the current thing right now, is conspiracy theories. The other one, actually, that always has and always will, is people who claim to be pro handicappers and pro bettors when they're very obviously not. But these pro bettors who don't understand the marketplace, that will forever grind my gears. Like, you can't be giving out betting advice when you don't understand how a betting market works. The number of people I see every single year, especially when it comes to, let's use the NBA playoffs as an example. You get a team that closes -4.5 game 2 at home. They then go on the road for game 3. They open up at +2.5, having just won their first 2 games by 10 points. And you get these so-called pro bettors being like, that's a trap line, or that shows strength to this team. No, that's just basic fucking market making. Like, how do you not understand that? If you're following someone who doesn't understand how a market gets made, that should just be immediate red flags. Like, something like that is just the easiest thing to work out. That's just flipping home court advantage. That's all they do. They flip home court advantage for playoffs. That's how a market gets made. Okay, it's really that simple. But then the wider scope conversation of the marketplace and not understanding how lines get made, how lines get moved, things like that, the player impact value to a line, people who just dismiss that or overestimate that, underestimate that, those things frustrate me to no end. Those things are things that I think, like I said, if you're following a handicapper on Twitter and they just don't have a general grasp for the marketplace, never mind whether they know the sport inside out or anything like that, that doesn't matter. Like, some of the smartest minds are some of the worst bettors, because they're just two completely different concepts. So if someone you're following doesn't understand the basic concepts of the marketplace and how it operates and how lines are made and moved, that's an immediate red flag. And that person is not a professional, as much as they might claim to be, and not someone worth following or investing your money in their plays until you're at least willing to take the time to do that half of the job that they clearly aren't willing to do. Those are the two things: conspiracy theories, pro cappers that don't understand the marketplace. Let's just leave it at that, because I could probably just keep going, and all it's going to take is one fucking comment in the comment box to set me off again. But that's a nice, fun way to sign off Q&A for today. But if there are any more that come up, we'll definitely keep doing, I think, more of these Q&A segments in the shows going forward for anyone that has questions. But like I said before as well, if you aren't already in the Discord, do click on the link below on our YouTube chat. Hit us up on Twitter as well. We can send you that link. Come and join the conversation and have some fun with the team in there. We have our squad ride official bet for today. We have our official best bets for today. I appreciate all of you guys again in the live chat, as always, having a lot of fun with you this season, and everyone in our Discord, much the same. If you enjoy the show, please do just click the thumbs up. It's a really simple task that goes a really, really long way to helping us out. And if you're listening back on Spotify or wherever it is you catch your podcast, please do leave a review as well before you sign off there. Share this around where possible, and let's keep enjoying this season as best we can. So best of luck to everyone today with all of your best bets as well. Look forward to doing this again in a couple of days' time. We will be back. I will have another guest with me on board, and I will tweet that out in due time. Let's go have a good day at the office, and hopefully, like I said, trend in the right direction heading into that All-Star break where things start to get really interesting. I appreciate everyone. Good luck with all your bets, and catch you all in a little bit.